Hello, I'm Patrick Nelson. I'm at the Think Tank Science Museum in Birmingham. I want to help you look more closely at science and the Bible. Many people believe that you can't take them both seriously, so let's find out whether that's really true. A science museum is a great place to start thinking about science and the Bible. We're going to begin by taking a look at a couple of displays that show some scientific achievements. So let's go and take a look at our first display. This spaceman reminds us that scientists can put men into orbit around the Earth and bring them safely back again. The space shuttle Atlantis has taken off for many missions. It spends several days in space on each mission before returning to the Earth. Astronauts test equipment sometimes floating more than 100 miles above the clouds. By putting telescopes into space, scientists have been able to give us some remarkable photographs of the universe around us. Scientists consistently amaze us with their achievements in space travel and by showing us just how incredible our universe is. But now, let's take a look at another amazing scientific discovery at the other end of the size scale. Most of us have heard that scientists have cracked the DNA code, even if we don't know anything about DNA. Although we may not know it, DNA controls every cell in our bodies. The DNA depicted here is a long molecule which contains information. That information is represented by the letters that we see along the bottom of the molecule. Groups of these letters represent genes, and the study of genes is known as genetics. Genes control the production of proteins, which in turn control the cells which make up all of life. Some control the basic functions of cells. Others give cells their special features and capabilities. We're going to take a look at some of those special features later, but for now, this is a simple description of the incredible complexities that scientists have discovered. Space travel and genetics are only two of the areas in which scientists have made amazing discoveries. We all tend to look up to people who do amazing things, and this is why scientists are widely respected by most people. Conversely, the Bible has taken a considerable battering from its scientific critics. Many people have now turned their backs on the Bible, believing that they cannot take science seriously and still believe what it has to say. For example, many people believe that scientists have proved that the universe started with a big bang, and the same people believe that the Bible contradicts this. Many people also think that scientists have proved that all the variety of life on this planet began with a process called evolution. If that is true, then the Bible would have to be wrong in talking about this world and all the life on it having been created. These are some of the things that we're going to take a closer look at throughout this presentation. So these are the questions that we have to consider. To enable us to decide which is more likely, we'd like to think about what the Bible says and about what science says. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information on both subjects, so to help us find the most useful information, we need to distinguish between two different fundamental ideas. Firstly, we need to think about observable facts. Secondly, we need to think about theories. An observable fact is something that can be proved beyond doubt. Observable facts are tangible, they're measurable, and they're repeatable. They are felt through our senses and can be experienced firsthand if necessary. Gravity is a good example of an observable fact. We all experience the effects of gravity every single day of our lives. Whenever we drop something, it always falls to the ground. If we throw a ball in the air, it always comes back to us. Scientists have done enough experiments and understand gravity well enough now to be able to launch rockets and put satellites into orbit around the Earth. So gravity is tangible, it's experienced and measurable. It's an observable fact. A scientist creates a theory or an opinion about something that he wants to look at in more detail. That theory is based on a set of assumptions and should be the best explanation of the observable facts. But sometimes we have no way of knowing if the set of assumptions that have been used are correct. This is often the case when considering something that occurred in the past, because we cannot do experiments to test the theory, and we have no way of checking the assumptions. It's important to know what can be proved and what is only a theory that we can't prove. Why? Because if we treat a theory as a fact, we may come to the wrong conclusion. We want to look at a couple of examples where theories lacking vital information were trusted, with disastrous consequences. In England, in the mid-19th century, some public health authorities believed in the miasma theory of disease. This was a theory that said disease was caused by a poisonous vapour, which they named miasma. This seemed to explain why cholera became epidemic in places where water was contaminated by sewage. The public health authorities believed that cholera was caused by the foul smell, the vapour that came off the water, rather than the water itself. In the same era, some doctors accepted the dyscrasia theory, which said that disease was caused by an imbalance in the body's temperament. These people did their best with the limited knowledge that they had. They were unaware even that they lacked vital information about viruses and bacteria. They trusted theories that were not based on all the facts. They saw no problem in drinking water that had been contaminated with sewage. The result of that was that tens of thousands of people died in the 4 cholera epidemics that broke out in England between 1831 and 1854. Neither did they see a problem in moving from a dead body to a living one without first washing their hands. As a result, up to 1 in 3 women died in hospital giving birth. Countless people died because doctors and public health authorities lacked vital facts when forming their theories. These 2 examples show that we need all the facts to come up with a correct theory. They also show us that we may not even be aware that we don't have all the facts. And so we see that it's important to separate facts from theories. Now that we understand the difference between facts and theories, let's see what this means for us. Firstly, we are going to look at the observable facts behind the theories of the Big Bang and evolution and see what conclusions we can draw. Secondly, we are going to look at what the Bible says about the start of things. Thirdly, we are going to see if there is any conflict between the observable scientific facts and what the Bible says. Finally, we will take a look at the cell, which is the basis of all life, and look at the implications for the theory of evolution. To help us with the first of these, let me introduce you to John Bland.
Well, hello. We're here at Jodrell Bank in Cheshire in the UK, and this behind me is the world-famous Lovell Radio Telescope. Scientists have been measuring things about the universe from this site since 1945, although the Lovell Telescope wasn't commissioned until 1957. And the Lovell Telescope is a radio telescope, which means that it's measuring radio waves coming to us from outer space. And there are several radio telescopes around the world, of which this one is actually one of the biggest. And it's observations of both normal light and radio waves from these modern telescopes that can help us understand our universe. This information has led scientists to formulate a theory called the Big Bang. And we're going to have a look at this, remembering as we do the difference between facts and theories that Patrick explained earlier. Now, there are actually 2 main observations or facts that have led scientists to formulate the Big Bang theory. In addition to that, there are 2 supporting observations or facts. Let's look at the main evidence first. And the first observation, which was made using telescopes like this, was made of distant galaxies. And when scientists looked at these galaxies, they found that the light looked slightly different from normal light. And the simplest way to describe this difference is to say that the light looked slightly red. And this is known as the red shift. The observation of this red shift is fact number 1. Now, fact number 2. When we look into outer space using other telescopes, we detect a radiation. And this is known as the cosmic microwave background radiation, and this background radiation is actually fact number 2. Now, there are 2 additional facts that I mentioned. The first of these involves the elements in the universe, things like hydrogen, helium, nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and so on. And what scientists have noticed is that the universe contains mainly elements that are light in weight. In fact, hydrogen and helium, the lightest elements, are by far the most common in the detectable universe. The second supporting fact that is often mentioned is the fact that galaxies seem to be evenly spread throughout space. And it doesn't matter in which particular direction we look, the spread of galaxies looks basically the same. So these then are the 4 facts, 3 of which we observe using modern telescopes such as this one here. Now let's look at the assumptions which lie behind this theory of the Big Bang, which, as we have seen, is derived from 4 observations or facts. The first major assumption is that nothing has ever happened to change the physical laws that we have today. A second assumption is that these laws are consistent, meaning the same, throughout the whole of the universe. A third assumption that is made is that the redshift is caused by the light source moving away from us. So using these 3 assumptions, together with our 4 observable facts, it becomes obvious that if our universe is expanding, then if we roll back time, everything can be traced to a single point in space-time from which it all started. And that is what we call the Big Bang. So that is the Big Bang theory based on the observable facts that we see around us today. But we do need to understand that it's based on the assumption that you can look back in time. All we're doing is creating this theory based on what we can see today. And not only that, we can't do any experiments or tests on this theory. So whilst scientists believe that the red shift is caused by the light source moving away from us, no one can actually prove that that is true. Scientists are doing the best with the available information. But the Big Bang theory is based on only a few facts, and it's also based on untestable assumptions. So we do need to be careful because, like the miasma and dyscrasia theories that we looked at earlier, we may be missing some important information. Therefore, the Big Bang theory remains just that, a theory, and cannot be regarded as a fact. So having thought about the Big Bang theory, we'll now leave Jodrell Bank and its magnificent telescope, and we'll look at a very different site that I visited a few months ago, and there we'll look at the theory of evolution. We've actually now come to Urkel Nature Reserve, which is west of Telford in the United Kingdom. And part of this reserve is actually an old quarry. And there are some very interesting rocks on the hills behind me. Let's take a closer look. Geologists call these types of rocks Lower Cambrian, and many fossils are found in this type of rocks, fossils that we refer to obviously as Cambrian fossils. And typical of the type of fossils found in these type of rocks are trilobites. And this particular one was found in slate in Utah in America, not here, in fact, at the Urkel in the UK. So many different types of fossils have been found in these Cambrian type of rocks. Now, as we've already talked, any theory should be the best explanation of the facts. And the theory of evolution talks about gradual change. So as we look for fossils in these type of rocks, we should expect to see many examples of fossils which are part way between the species and creatures that we can see today. But what are actually the facts from the fossil record? If we actually look at the fossil record, what we actually see are well-defined species. We don't find intermediary fossils part way between groups or species. Now, one example of an intermediary fossil that is often mentioned is Archaeopteryx, and I'd just like to think a little bit about that. The Archaeopteryx fossil shows that the animal had bird's feathers, and yet it also had the toothed jaw of a reptile. And because of that, people have suggested that it is transitional or intermediary. However, the reality of this fossil is that all of its features are fully formed. We don't see a feather in formation, we see a fully formed feather, just like birds' feathers today. And in fact, as we look at the fossil generally, we actually see that it is fully ready for flight. It had the brain case similar to a modern bird. So from the facts, everything had progressed to make this a fully formed bird. And it's very much like the duck-billed platypus that we can observe alive today in Australia. The duck-billed platypus has the beak of a duck, and again, it's not a half-formed beak, it's a fully formed beak. The duck-billed platypus has the fur like a mammal. It's not half-formed fur, it's fully mammalian fur. And this is the reality. These are the facts of the fossil record and of species today. We don't observe transitionary or intermediary species. Darwin, in his classic Origin of the Species, acknowledged this lack of transitional animals. This is what he wrote. As by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in the crust of the earth? Why is all nature not in confusion, instead of being, as we see them, well-defined species? The explanation lies, however, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record. Darwin was honest enough to admit these missing links, but he confidently expected that they would be filled in time. Have they? When, 140 years later in 1999, Professor Steve Jones of the University College in London published an updated Origin of Species, the fossil record still had the same problem. This is what he wrote. The fossil record, in defiance of Darwin's whole idea of gradual change, often makes great leaps from one form to the next. Far from the display of intermediates to be expected from slow advance through natural selection, many species appear without warning, persist in fixed form, and disappear, leaving no descendants. Geology assuredly does not reveal any finely graduated organic chain, and this is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against the theory of evolution. Fossils discovered in rocks like these give us an impressive fact, which is that the fossil record does not contain the partly developed animals that the theory of evolution predicts. This part of the quarry is actually internationally famous. Up here on my left, we can see grey rocks of the Cambrian era. But across here, to my right, we can see these pink rocks which are of the pre-Cambrian era, and geologists believe that these predate the more recent Cambrian rocks up here. And so far we've been talking about fossils which have been found in these Cambrian type of rocks, where we find many fossils, as we have said. Strangely, very few fossils are found in these pink type rocks over here on my right. Most major groups of animals and plants and species which are seen in the fossil record appear fully formed in these grey Cambrian type rocks. And this is how Richard Dawkins, who's an ardent supporter of the theory of evolution, describes it. The Cambrian strata of rocks, vintage about 600 million years, are the oldest ones in which we find most of the invertebrate groups. And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution the very first time they appear. It is as though they were just planted there, without any evolutionary history. So we see one of the prime supporters of the theory of evolution acknowledging the fact that in these grey type of rocks, all of the fossils appear without any history of them in these pink type of rocks. Now, the type of fossils found in the grey rocks typically are examples like trilobites, and how these creatures appear is actually a mystery to the theory of evolution, because according to that theory, animals develop slowly, and their sudden appearance here doesn't fit the theory of evolution. Now, some have suggested that the ancestors of these Cambrian-type fossils were soft-bodied, and that therefore they didn't form fossils, so that we wouldn't expect to find them in the fossil record. However, recently, fossils of soft-bodied creatures have been found in these pink type of Precambrian rocks, and here is an example of one which was discovered early in South Australia. Since then, many more soft-bodied plants and animals have been found fossilised in rocks like these, the pink ones. But there is a problem because they are not transitional species. The fossils found in the pink type of rocks do not lead on to the fossils found in the grey type of rocks. Ancestors of the Cambrian fossils are not found in the fossil record. So again, the facts of the fossil record don't support the theory of evolution. Before finishing our look at the theory of evolution, I'd like to take a look at a couple of other facts that are often used to support this theory. And one of the most important is the comparative studies of modern plants, animals and insects and so forth, a branch of science which is known as cladistics. It's obvious that when you look at certain animals, some look like each other, and what humans have done is they've produced a classification system placing things that look alike in the same group. Monkeys and humans are similar. We both have arms, we both have legs, we both have 10 fingers and thumbs. Or by contrast, horses, donkeys and zebras are similar. They all have 4 legs. They all have a single hoof. They all have a certain design of face or snout. And this has led men to classify animals together. However, we can't do any experiments. We don't know how these observable facts came to be. And the theory of evolution is only one possible explanation. An equally valid explanation is that an intelligent designer created them like that. Both are equally valid explanations. Another argument used to support the theory of evolution is variation within species. Look at dogs, the argument goes. Look at all of the different breeds that humans on a relatively short timescale have been able to produce. And the argument continues that, given enough time, this variation could produce new creatures. Now, the simple fact is that this has never been observed. Equally, the scale of change needed is vastly different from that which has actually been observed. It's one thing to see finches with different beaks, as Darwin did. It's a huge jump, and indeed it's unscientific to say that the same mechanism can explain the appearance of a heart, could explain the appearance of bone or of feathers, or even warm-blooded creatures like you and I. Significant variations have never been observed, and I re-emphasise it is not good scientific practice to extend known information far beyond what has been seen. It's not scientific, and in fact you cannot use the very minor, the tiny changes in variation within species as evidence to support the huge changes required by evolution. So let's just summarise then what we've seen in our visits to Jodrell Bank and also the Urkel Nature Reserve. Firstly, the Big Bang Theory. This is actually based on only a few facts and can't actually be proved. Scientists are doing their best, but with a very limited amount of information, and it's important therefore to accept that we may be missing some important information. However, the few facts that we do have support the theory that the universe started with a Big Bang, provided finally we are prepared to accept some assumptions that we also can't actually prove. Secondly, the theory of evolution. The simple truth is that the facts of the fossil record don't support the theory of evolution, because animals appear fully formed as distinct, different creatures in the fossil record, and there are no transitional forms. Equally, comparing animals that we see around us today gives no information as to how these animals actually came into existence. And finally, the small changes and variations that have been seen between species are tiny and are insufficient evidence to actually support the large variations required by the theory of evolution. Now that we've looked at the facts behind the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution, Patrick will now take you on the next stage of our investigation into the Bible and science.
Thank you, John. Let me introduce Paul Tavel. Paul is going to look at what the Bible says about the start of things, and then we will see if there is a conflict between the observable facts that John has been talking about and what Paul tells us.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm here in a bookshop in Birmingham, which specialises in Bibles. John's been looking at the observable facts in science. Now we want to see what the equivalent is for the Bible. If we think about it, we'll see that it's the text of these Bibles that we can think of as being the observable facts. Now we look carefully at the observable facts in science, so we must be sure to look equally carefully at the observable facts in the Bible. So let's look at one of these Bibles now and see what it has to say about the start of things. Let's look at the first few words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Leaving aside for the moment the argument about whether or not a creator was involved, this sentence tells us that the universe, including our earth, came into existence at some point called the beginning. The Bible then goes on to say, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep." We're now told that at one stage our earth was covered with water, uninhabited and dark. Opinions vary among Bible students over what the text is saying about the beginning of the universe and our earth and how long it all took. Some Bible students think that there could be a time gap between the words, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," and "Now the earth was formless and empty." So they think the Bible could be saying the universe was made some unspecified time before planet Earth came to be how it is now. Regardless of these differences of opinion about the details, we can see that the Bible text still tells us that planet Earth came into existence and was at one stage covered with water, totally uninhabited and dark. The first two chapters of the Bible then tell us that our world, as we know it today, came into being in 6 stages. The record seems to be of what someone on the earth would have seen as events unfolded. At each stage, God gives instructions, and the record then confirms that the instructions are carried out. The Bible tells us that at the first stage, the instruction from God is, "Let there be light." For the first time, light reaches the water that covers the earth. We're also told that God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. The water now experiences the vital cycle of day and night. The instructions for the second stage are, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water." We can see what this means when we read, "God called the expanse sky." The water around the earth is separated to form clouds and sea. There is now a space for life, but with an abundant supply of water which is vital to sustain life. At the third stage, the instructions are, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." Land appears together with plant life. Vegetation flourishes in the environment provided at this stage. The fourth stage instructions are, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years." So what probably happens at this stage is that the clouds separate and the sun and moon appear. The cycle of the seasons is now established so that life can be supported. For the fifth stage, the instruction is, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. And so at this stage life appears in the sea and in the air. The final instructions in this great project are, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So the land animals appear, with man appearing last of all. The record makes no attempt, however, to explain how this was done. A phrase that occurs several times is, "and it was so," telling us that the instructions are accurately carried out. So we've seen that the Bible is telling us that everything came into existence in 6 stages. At the end of the first stage, we read this: "And there was evening and there was morning, the first day." There are similar statements at the end of each of the other stages, and these statements are all telling us that each stage was a day in length. The second book of the Bible, Exodus, supports these statements that we've been looking at in Genesis. It has this to say: "In 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them." If we look then at how the Bible uses the word day, we see that it usually refers to a 24-hour period. But if we look carefully at the text of the Bible, we see that occasionally it refers to longer time periods. And one example of this occurs in the creation account itself, in Genesis chapter 2. There the Bible talks about the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. This day contains the whole 6 days of creation that we've been looking at. And we use the word day in this sense when we talk about our day and age, or Queen Victoria's day. So we can see that the text is flexible in its use of the word day in the creation account. However, none of these comments gives us any more information about the mechanisms involved. The Bible is far more concerned about why we are here and the purpose behind our existence. So, to summarise, this is what the Bible tells us about how we got here. Our earth had a beginning. At one stage in our planet's history, it was totally uninhabited and dark. And life then appeared on our planet in stages, with man appearing last of all. We should bear in mind that there are differences of opinion over how long all this took. Now, it may surprise us, but that's about all the Bible text actually tells us about the start of everything.
Thank you, Paul. This then is Paul's summary of what the Bible text says about the start of things. The big question is, do these conflict with the observable facts that science gives us? The fact that light coming from different parts of the universe looks different to the light that we normally see, and the fact that there is a background radiation does not conflict with the Bible statement that the universe had a beginning. If we accept the scientists' belief that the redshift means the universe is expanding, again, this agrees with the Bible statement that the universe had a beginning. And the observable fact that fossils appear fully formed agrees with the Bible statement that life appeared in stages, with man appearing last of all. If we consider the time periods for the start of things, we see that there is no conflict if we restrict ourselves to the observable facts. If we think carefully, all the dating methods have assumptions. The oldest objects of known age are only a few thousand years old. We have no object which says, I am 40 million years old, use me as a calibration sample. So we don't have all the facts. Remember our examples from earlier, from medical history. If we don't have all the facts, we can easily reach to wrong conclusions. In dating methods, we don't have all the facts, so our conclusions could be wrong. Whatever view we take of the Bible text regarding time periods, there is no conflict with science because there are no observable scientific facts to enable us to check our theories. In conclusion, I think we can see that when we consider the observable facts that science has discovered, there is no conflict with what the Bible says. In the remaining part of this presentation, John is going to take a look at the cell and see the implications for the theory of evolution.
Thank you, Patrick. I want to think briefly about the cell because it's the basic building block of life. All life consists of one or more of these building blocks. The simplest forms of life are single-celled creatures, and we will more than likely find some single-celled creatures in water like this if we simply look carefully enough. In warm weather, you'll sometimes see a green scum on the surface of ponds, and this green scum is formed by single-celled creatures called euglenas. These single-celled creatures are the simplest form of life. By contrast, most forms of life contain many cells. For example, the human body contains more than 10 million cells of about 200 different types. Scientists have discovered that there are many parts in a typical animal cell. And just as a house has a kitchen, a living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom, so a cell has specialised areas partitioned off for separate uses. There's an area for information and controls, an area for energy production, one for waste disposal, another for chemical storage, another for chemicals processing. A room in a house is separated from the rest of the house by its walls, and doors are used to control what comes in and out. In just the same way, each compartment of the cell is sealed off from the rest by membranes, and these have openings to allow some chemicals in and out. And there are highly sophisticated systems to ensure that only the correct chemicals come in and out of these compartments. And one of the functions of the DNA that Patrick mentioned earlier is to provide information for these systems. In total, there are more than 20 different sections in a cell, and these systems must accurately regulate chemical movements between every one of these sections. One thing that it is important to remember is that every cell that has ever been discovered has all of these systems in place to enable it to survive. So let's just summarise then the facts that we've covered about the cell. Firstly, the cell is the basis for all life. Secondly, it's incredibly complicated. Thirdly and finally, all the cells that have ever been discovered have all the essential systems in place. Now I want to think about the implications of that last fact for the theory of evolution. If all the cells that have ever been discovered are fully operational, this means that we have no observable facts to suggest that cells have ever been anything other than complete and fully functional. Remembering that a theory should be the best explanation of the facts, what we've seen in relation to the cell would not lead us to think that it gradually developed in the way the theory of evolution claims. Theories have been put forward suggesting that animal cells developed from more simple yeast cells. But again, we must remember that these simple yeast cells were complete and fully functional. We should also bear in mind that they are actually far from simple, and there are also no observable facts that indicate that yeast cells did develop into more complex cells. So, we can see that by just looking at the observable facts, we would not be led to think that the cell, the basic building block of life, developed as the theory of evolution suggests. What we have just seen agrees with what we saw at the Urkel Nature Reserve. Both the fossil record and the observations made about the cell indicate that life appeared complete and fully functional. I'll now hand you back to Patrick, who will complete our look at the Bible and science.
Thank you, John. Let's now recap on the main points that we've seen. Firstly, facts and theories. We have seen that facts are tangible, measurable, and repeatable. A theory with its assumptions should be the best explanation of the facts. But theories can be disastrously wrong if we don't have all the facts. Comparing the Bible statement with the scientific observations, we have seen that both suggest the universe had a beginning, and both indicate that life appeared in a complete form. Therefore, there is no conflict between the scientific facts and what the Bible tells us. And so, when we look at the observable facts, we see that the Bible and science agree. This means that there's no reason to think that the Bible is unscientific when talking about a creator. There is a lot of evidence to show that the Bible came from a power greater than ourselves. If it makes sense to believe in a creator, then surely it also makes sense to find out what that creator has to tell us. And we can find that out by looking at the message that he has given us. And that message is the Bible. In conclusion, we would appeal to you. Take notice of facts, not unproven theories. The Bible is still credible in this scientific age, and it has a relevant message for you today. It can offer real purpose to your life and offer you hope for the future. We hope that you have found this presentation useful and thought-provoking. You can find more information about the Bible and science on the Evidence You Decide website, www.theevidence.org.uk. The same material is also available in this free booklet pack. We'll give you the address to send to at the end. The website and the booklet pack give more reasons why you should be thinking about the Bible. So have a look for yourself and see that the evidence all adds up to show that the Bible is worth looking at. Thank you for listening.